Well, welcome. My name is George Trianis. I'm on the faculty at the law school, and this is a very special occasion. And we're really very honored and fortunate to have four of the leading general counsels participating in this panel. What we're interested in is what's been happening in the market for legal services and what implications it has for us as legal educators. But first, what I'd like to do is introduce the members of the panel. Starting at the end of the table, Mark Chandler is General Counsel at Cisco. Vijaya Gadi is General Counsel at Twitter. Colin Stretch is General Counsel at Facebook. And John Schultz is General Counsel at HP. They have obviously longer and distinguished bios that I'll let you look at the website that gives notice of this panel. So let's proceed on to the discussion. What I propose to do is to have the panel members respond to questions and discuss certain issues that I'll bring up for approximately the first 45 minutes, and then open it to questions. And when we do open it to questions, if you could come down to one or the other of the microphones. This event is being recorded, and so we also want to get your questions as part of the recording as well. As I said, I'm on the faculty here. I'm also the Associate Dean for Strategic Planning, and it's just a fascinating job to be supporting the Dean and thinking about the law school strategy going forward. And part of the reason that it's so fascinating is, of course, there are two types of transformations that are happening in a very dramatic fashion at the same time that impact us. The one is the transformation in the profession or in the market for legal services, and the other one is equally dramatic, and that is in higher education. I'll let the experts speak with respect to the legal profession. With respect to higher education, I think when you look not just at law schools, but across our peer universities, there are four categories of transformations going on, or four areas in which universities are paying special attention to. The first is to continue the process of the last maybe 15, 20 years to increase the amount of interdisciplinary research and interdisciplinary education. The second is to increase the global or international content of both research and education, and in many cases also the mission of the service mission of the faculty and of the students. The third falls under the category that has become popular in thinking about law schools, this notion of experiential learning. Which means whatever you want it to mean. But broadly speaking, it is whatever clinic, simulation, or other type of courses increase the connection with the practical world, with the real world. And the fourth is a focus on the new technology. And obviously, pedagogy is one area where that has been particularly important, and the emergence of online education. But it goes beyond that. The emergence of online education really has been a catalyst for people thinking about how better to deliver the content that we do at universities. So those are four areas, and they may come up in the discussion here because perhaps there would be a connection to the sort of skills that our graduates will need in entering a legal practice or some law-related profession. So we do emphasize in law school and universities the connections between theory and practice, between theory and research and the related practice, so that theory and research inform practice, but also they are informed by practice. And these sort of exchanges here, these sort of discussions are very, very important to law schools at this time where there is such a fundamental transformation going on and such important decisions to be made. We're fortunate that we're in Silicon Valley, so the idea of experimenting, trying new things is not anathema. In fact, it's actually something that gets you points here. So this is also, I wanted to encourage everybody in this room, especially the panelists, to sort of as they are used to in their own jobs, to think outside the box and think of creative ways of improving the education at the law school. So that's a longer introduction to the content than I wanted to make, but so let me stop talking and just begin to ask about the what has been the transformation in the profession, and in particular the transformation that has motivated the selection of the people on this panel, which is the rise over the past decades of the in-house counsel and the in-house legal departments, to the extent that the title for this session actually says that the power has shifted. So has the power shifted? Can you explain what has happened over the last couple of decades with respect to in-house department? Let me start with Mark.
Thanks. I've been a general counsel of a public company in Silicon Valley since 1988 with about a 5-year hiatus, so I probably have a scope and perspective on transformation. And I think the fundamental source of both transformations that you described is the same, which is that every knowledge-based industry in the world is being transformed by new technological tools that allow people to find information more easily and repurpose it more easily. And it predates that transformation to make the observation that knowledge is power. But it's true. And what's happened, in my experience in-house, was the need to rely on outside counsel as the single source of truth, if you will, for things that you're looking for to solve internal problems, has grown less as you have more and more access to information yourself, more and more resources that are available to draw on. At the same time, those technological transformations have forced budgetary disciplines on general counsel that just didn't exist. When I started in this role at a different company, at a Fortune 500 company in 1988, 7 years after I left this place, the legal function was basically a black box. You know, I did what needed to be done as long as nothing terrible happened. No one really looked very closely at it. And as enterprise control tools became more powerful, I became subject to much more direct budgetary control, need to justify what I was doing, to show where I was spending money, and to show how I would scale services and how I would reduce costs over time as a percent of the company's revenue. And all those things made me then drive my outside counsel to be much more competitive in the way they provide services. And once I started forcing them to come to me and to bid on work, the power shifted, I would say.
Great.
So
well, my company is only 7 years old, and I've only been general counsel for 8 months, so I don't know that I'll have quite the broad perspective that Mark
probably
has.
used my equipment this morning, and I tweeted this morning. So
There you go, exactly. I'll say the one thing that I've noticed, when I started at Twitter 3 years ago, we had just started building our legal department. I was the 8th person, 6th lawyer, and we had this perspective that at least for the first hires in any particular functional area, we wanted someone with really great experience to help lead these challenging problems we were facing, because they were in many cases problems of first impression. There weren't even law firms necessarily that had answers to our questions, and we'd figure it out together. And what we found as we've grown the team is that we kind of like that model. We like figuring it out ourselves. We like hiring the brightest people that we can hire. And we've built in these really great internal functions, and we are using law firms less for their expertise in a particular area and more for manpower in particular situations. So I've seen more and more of that, and I think that that's a trend, at least in our department, that's going to continue.
So I've got 2 months on you. So and I don't have the same perspective. I don't disagree with anything Mark said, but I just don't have the same lens into the transformation over the last few decades. I was in private practice from 1999 until 2010 when I joined Facebook and became general counsel last summer. Our model is, I think, pretty similar to Twitter's. If given the choice, I'd rather have somebody in-house doing any particular function. And the main reason is that I think when you're in-house, you are better able to develop just a deep knowledge of the business and of the client, how the company works. And that's a sort of learning curve. You do that once and you become pretty effective in whatever your function is. So, we get, I don't know, call it 15, pick a random number, open source questions that come up in any given week. And we got a guy who's been at the company for a couple years, knows open source backwards and forwards, knows the company really well, and he can just knock that stuff out, and he's just nails. He's great. If we had to ship every one of those out, it'd be a disaster, not just because the quality of the advice wouldn't be as strong, but because it would take too long, right? I mean, these folks, they want to know today if they can contribute to a particular project, and you just can't get that sort of responsiveness from an outside firm on stuff that recurs frequently. And I'd say there's, various functions that fall into that category. Open source is one, patent prosecution is another. Our deal lawyers are primarily, not exclusively, but primarily in-house. That's probably the largest sort of single function in terms of person power that we have in the department. On the flip side, let's see, it'll be in about 3 weeks, it will be 2 years since our IPO. And 3 days after our IPO, we were sued 52 times in a single day. We don't have, the manpower just laying around to be able to handle something like that. That was incredibly complex. It remains complex. I feel like we hired 52 law firms in the ensuing weeks. And so there are those, seismic threats that arise, both on the litigation side and then in other areas as well, particularly around our disclosures and our filings, where we really do rely on the expertise of outside counsel. But my main takeaway is I'd rather do it in-house if I can, simply because I do think the quality of advice and the responsiveness is better when you have people who are really, really directly tied to the business, know the business, and understand the business.
Great. So first, let me thank Lucy for the invitation. It's a great opportunity to be here and express some views, but more importantly, hear from all of you. And to the extent we don't get a chance, I'd invite especially the law students to reach out. Jay Schultz at hp.com, we'd love to hear from you. We are really focused on law schools these days. We've been hiring out of law school for the last 4 years since I got to HP. This year we'll have our first summer program, 6 2Ls coming. We're paying $145 starting salary. So not quite at the top of the market, but we're headed there because we really believe that our future is to become much more self-sufficient and have the entry point be the best and the brightest from law schools, not what the law firms decide to cast off to us 4 or 5 years later.
You realize I'm going to give everybody else equal time.
You
on
can,
the
absolutely,
recruitment.
absolutely. So, I've been at HP 5 years. I was an outside lawyer for 20 years, partner at Morgan Lewis. HP was my biggest client, and when they asked me to come in, it was a big change, and I really thought the only reason to do it was if we could do something that was different and unique. And so we have been focused on innovation and transformation since I got there. And quite frankly, I was not a business person. I don't know anything about finances. I don't know a whole lot about economics, but I've learned a lot in the last 5 years. And what you find out is when you have mature, profitable industries, they never disrupt themselves. And the law firms talk it and they think about it, but the profit incentives in their business model don't allow them to disrupt themselves. I've been at 2 partner retreats in the last 3 weeks. And it is the old style of law. And again, they want to talk about it, they want to hear about it, but it's challenging their profit margins. As Mark said, in-house, our daily life is doing more with less. We have to be more productive, we have to be more efficient, we have to be more effective. And so we have no choice. The good news is, I think at the same time, what's happened over the last 10 years in particular is CEOs, boards of directors, and senior management have become much more comfortable with the law. They understand the law better today than they did 10 years ago, and they're more accepting of the idea that I need a permanent legal function that delivers services at the level I need them to be delivered, and I'm going to expect you to run your organization the same way the businesses run their organization. So you have this increased sophistication in-house, this more for less challenge. At the same time, the law firms want higher rates, higher margins, and continue to fail to innovate. I tell law firms all the time, you can stop me at any moment in time. But the truth is, I just don't think they're capable of doing it. And so the law departments continue to take back more work, because as you think about it, we're a law firm. They get what we choose to give to them. And the less I choose to give to them and keep for myself, because I can do it better and more efficient, the smaller their market, the larger my market. And that's effectively what I think is happening inside of a lot of law departments. Whether you hire for law schools or not is a separate issue. But at the end of the day, I think general counsels around the country, and quite frankly, it's becoming international, realize we can do it better, we can do it more efficiently than the law firms in most instances,
So all of you are involved in, no doubt, in decisions as to what they call make or buy decisions as to whether to outsource other things, whether it's General Motors outsourcing parts and so on. So in what way are legal services different, and would you see a similar ebb and flow? Sometimes General Motors integrates and brings things in-house, and then they turn around and they outsource them and they go back and forth. Is that going to happen with legal services, or is there a steady state here?
It's absolutely what all of us are engaged in all the time, and I'll start with what Colin was talking about in terms of what's done inside and what's done outside. The way I think of it is what is core to my company? What establishes competitive advantage for Cisco? Why do people want to buy our products and not our competitors' products? And what's context? What do we have to do? Because we're a company and we have responsibilities in the community and to the law and operational requirements internally. And I look at those two categories and I make different decisions. So the things that are core to my company and are big transactions, I have 80% of my in-house staff is doing that work because they know the company. I also have a person or several people who are open source experts, and they know they've done this for Cisco over and over and over again, and they can deal with it very quickly. They know all the people in the engineering department. Context are things like big litigation or securities law compliance or things that will affect our reputation, things that are more discrete projects that are one-offs. They may be repetitive, but where it really doesn't make sense to invest in the staff because the work is focused on external requirements, not on things that are core to delivering value in the marketplace. So for that reason, it makes sense to have a lot of people who know how to do the transactions that Facebook needs to do, but you wouldn't want to hire a staff of securities litigation experts no matter how many times you got sued. And we get sued all the time too. But then within that, I say to myself, how do I get that work done more efficiently? How do I build contract management tools so my people who are doing transactions can very quickly find the right template, build a template using artificial intelligence? How do I automate the work so there's very heavily AI-driven databases on open source so engineers can actually find 90% of the answers themselves and not have to call that person? How do I make a tool so for non-disclosure agreements that we have thousands of people can build them themselves out in the field, get them to customers, get them signed electronically, but with enough trap doors so that there are issues, they'll talk to a lawyer? How do I build a team of people in Krakow and Dublin and Bangalore and Raleigh, North Carolina, who can handle a lot of those repetitive transactions that fall through the trap doors? Give them the tools to get that done quickly. When I hire outside counsel to do those things that are context, to do that big litigation or to advise on major HR decisions, how do I make sure that the data they have available to them is as efficient as possible? So I build a discovery lab to bring their costs down. No one does litigation for us unless they use our discovery lab, which wipes out huge amounts of human labor that they would otherwise put into it. And then for some types of transactions, like facilities leases or individual plaintiff litigation, I outsource it completely. I take bids, I manage for quality, but I don't devote any inside resources, those people who know their way around the company, to that. That's an outsource. I drive the cost down. I make that as competitive as possible, and if they blow it, they get fired. But it's never going to bring the ship down if the Dublin, Ohio sales office has an auto renewal for an extra year when we hoped it would terminate. So that's how I make that build buy decision. But when I'm doing it internally, I'm also always thinking, how do I use technology to transform what we're doing, to drive the cost down and make me more efficient? And I'll shut up now, but I've got another example I'll give in a minute.
Any other thoughts about technology
I'm learning a ton, actually. I think this is
and automating?
So I had my, we do a function review with the CEO, and ours was last week. And we devoted about an hour of the hour and a half to our innovation agenda. And it is all about technologies and business process reengineering inside the legal department. We've launched an end-to-end IP solution from trademarks and licensing to patent development to IP transactions. That's all technology-based. And it's based on the idea that, again, that technology can make you more productive and efficient in a way that law firms are not tackling the problem. So 5 years ago, we wrote no patents in-house. We write 1,700 patents a year. We wrote none of them in-house. This year, we will write 55% in-house, on our way to 75%. We have had them every year scored by outside counsel on a blind sampling of quality and then looked at cost. We do it cheaper, we do it better. We know we're going to write 15, 17, 2,000 patents a year. We don't ramp all the way to the top end, but we're going to ramp up to 80, 90% and do it better. And we're going to bring the technology layer on top of it. We've done that in any number of areas. Obviously, as Mark said, contracting is a huge expense inside a company, but it's also critical to how your clients see you from a go-to-market perspective. So we have a number of things that we've been doing in that space, both in sort of centers of excellence and in software, to make our go-to-market much easier and much more efficient. At the end of the day, I still come back to this notion that right now law firms are not focused on productivity and efficiency. They're focused on rates and margins, and they haven't been forced to deal with the kind of productivity and efficiency that is core to business and, quite frankly, is absolutely at the center of Silicon Valley. Absolutely center of Silicon Valley, and I think that's really been what's been forced on the general counsels. But I think you're seeing more and more general counsels accept the challenge, and quite frankly, it is invigorating for the people inside the legal departments. That was kind of the unexpected surprise for me, is that it refired a lot of engines who had been in idle for quite some time. And at a company like HP with 1,200 people in the legal department, we had a lot of people sitting in idle for a while. And the innovation and the technology has actually refired those engines, which has been just this absolute added benefit.
Just to add on, our build versus buy decisions are obviously at a much smaller scale, but one of the other things we consider, in addition to what's core to our business versus what's not, is how fulfilling this work would be for someone inside of our company. Because one of the things, and I think everyone would agree, that we all focus on is the management challenges of making sure people on our teams have these great careers and they're excited and engaged, as you were saying, every day. And some of my buy versus build is this interesting work? Is someone going to come here and be excited about doing it? Or should I keep it at my law firm so I don't have the management challenges with somebody not happy and not excited and wanting to do something else the minute we bring this work in-house?
Vijay, I wanted to build on that, or ask you to say a little bit more about that, because you've actually painted kind of a scary contrast for I think for a lot of students, which is you could go to a law firm and be, I think you called it manpower, right? Or you could come and do really exciting work in-house. So assuming that they're sold, that what they want to do is they want to come in-house and do really exciting work, what are you going to be looking for? What sort of people, what skills are you going to be looking for in bringing them onto this exciting team?
The main thing I'm looking for actually is someone who's really passionate about what they're doing. We're small enough at our size that we need people who are inspired by what they're doing every day. So I'm looking for people who've really excelled in whatever area of law that they have decided to focus on. And that comes across because it comes across in their dedication, their responsiveness, how they rise to the challenges that I feel like we as technology companies are facing every day. So that's like core to what I'm looking for.
Open question. What would you
I
be
would-
looking for to
I-
join your
I-
exciting team?
I agree. Yeah, passion. And I'd just be very candid. I look for passion in Facebook because the people who are most happy and successful are people who are really connected to the mission of the company. So if you're not like down with drinking the Kool-Aid, you're just not gonna like it every day. So that's part of it. So, and I share that view. We, our challenges are still evolving, and so we, don't hire for specific disciplines. If we're going to hire onto our commercial team, we'll hire somebody with some commercial experience, but we're not necessarily, hyper focused on the particular function that person's been handling in their experience to date, because if they're doing, platform partnerships today, they'll be doing advertising deals tomorrow. Folks move around a lot. We, sort of think of it as to use a sports analogy, they talk about the draft. Do you draft the best available athlete? That's undoubtedly the case for us. We try to get people who are versatile, pretty comfortable being uncomfortable. And I will just, this will be maybe contrary to message a little bit, I will make a plug for law firms in the sense that I think, and maybe it's just because I came from one, but I do think that I do think, top tier, excellent law firms are a good place to learn how to practice law. I think the quality bar at some of these places is exceptionally high. You learn how to do it right. You learn how to really pay attention to details, and it's always in the details that the cases get won or lost. And I think you also learn, if you're practicing with good people, a little bit about judgment, and that's ultimately what you hope to bring to any client in any context is judgment, and it's helpful to be in a position where you're learning from people who are good, and there are plenty of really, really good lawyers at the firms that people in this room will be looking at. I completely agree, though, with what Mark and John were saying, is that the model is not sustainable. There remains a tier of firms that can continue to accelerate their rates and really worry about their margins. That is enough to keep a number of excellent firms going for a little while. But the rest of the market is really getting squeezed. And I think that pressure is going to continue to ratchet up even into the top tier as we go forward. It's just an unsustainable model.
Yeah, ultimately, to me, it's about alignment of interests with firms and companies. And the business model of the law firm built around the number of hours billed doesn't necessarily provide incentives for efficiency, and I think that's an understatement. I think it creates incentives in the other direction. So what I've tried to do is align incentives as part of my role. So when I make people bid for work, I'm not trying to make anybody unprofitable. My law firm partners, business partners, have to be profitable and have to feel good about the work. And I'll give you one example that I was thinking of a moment ago. We have 350 subsidiaries around the world. We're active in more than 120 countries. And each one of those subsidiaries needs to have annual meetings and various statutory filings, and we need to keep track of that. And we used to do that by dog's breakfast of law firms all around the world, and we'd manage each of them, and they'd bill us. And really, it was very difficult to control. And then we had other law firms that would manage those law firms. It wouldn't be very effective. So what we did is we put it out for bid, and we said, we want bids on managing this function for us globally. We want you to create software so that we can immediately see any document that we want to see. So if I, on this, I could right now call up the minutes of the 2002 annual meeting of one of the subsidiaries in Belgium and be looking at them. And I can do that, but it's off because I didn't want to interfere with the microphone. And I also want you to then give me a fixed fee for doing that globally. And guess what? That price is going to come down 5% every year. And so now they find the law firms. Now, the law firm that won that is Orrick, the former chairman of whom, Ralph Baxter, has been a great supporter of the Center for Study of the Legal Profession. And they built this, and what the partner who's in charge of that said, it's really interesting. Usually we're trying to find ways when people are our clients to get them to use our offshore offices so we can generate billable hours there. They have only a few offshore offices, which is why they're ideal. He said, but in this case, because our profitability depends on lowering costs, we're spending all our time trying to find ways for those other law firms to lower their costs and do the job more efficiently. To which, my reaction was, duh, that is what this is about. They're making money on this. So that's one model for how to drive alignment with the law firm. And the other is simply to get them to think about what work needs to be done, what doesn't need to be done, and to give them incentives through the compensation structure so they're aligned with you in not overkilling a project, but right-sizing it. And that's my thought on that. I don't think it's miserable to work in a law firm. Our people who are, we have some great folks out there who've really kicked ass in some patent issues lately, and they're having an awful lot of fun working for us.
So I would say, in terms of what we're looking for, it's been interesting. I was a hiring partner in the law firm for a long time, ran the summer committee for about 5 years, did a lot of on-campus interviewing, saw a lot of law students. And what we're looking for at HP is different. And there's a couple reasons for it. When you're a law student, you go into a big law firm, your first client is likely to be a junior associate who you report to on a big case. And then when you become a junior associate, your client is primarily a senior associate or junior partner. And you work your way up reporting from one level of lawyer to another level of lawyer until hopefully at some point you get a chance to actually meet a real client. But in your mind, the real client is just another lawyer at another legal department. You rarely meet the business person and provide business advice and judgment and counseling to those folks. You may not see that person and really counsel them until you're a 10th year, a 12th year, a 14th year, because big law firms no longer have small cases. So what they tell you is do pro bono. Meet pro bono clients and learn how to counsel pro bono clients. Love pro bono, very good, you should do it for all the right reasons, not just those that are personal to yourself, but it's a great thing. But counseling a client who's got sort of those kind of personal needs is not the same thing as counseling a business client with a business need, right? So what do you need inside a company to be successful? Number one, you have to have excellent communication skills. If you know the answer, but you can't communicate it in a way that non-lawyers can understand it, you're sunk. You're absolutely sunk. You've got to have tremendous communication skills. And that usually goes in connection with having fantastic interpersonal skills. You have to be a people person. We don't have a lot of people in HP, save HP Labs, who come in, go into a cube, bury themselves in their computer, and don't talk to anyone. My lawyers are sitting with people on a regular basis, daily, hourly, in that interpersonal connection. And it's actually the area that I would counsel law schools to think more about spending time on, communication and interpersonal skills. Because in reality, that's what you need to succeed inside a company like HP. So when we're out hiring in law schools, we're certainly looking for the best and the brightest. But we're looking for people who have the personality, the communication skills, someone who can sit across from me and engage with me in a way that I know, not only do you know the right answer, but I know you're going to be able to deliver it in a way that's going to get through to someone who isn't a lawyer and is going to make you effective in that setting. And so that's really important for us. And quite frankly, there are a lot of 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th year in law firms who don't have that skill because they were never forced to acquire it. And they make a fair amount of money and they do a very nice job where they are, but they would not work for us. And so we think we can build that skill right out of law school for folks, and that's why we've kind of taken a different tack. So that's what we're looking for right now when we go out to hire people.
Can I just add, just to build on that, just one point. I agree with the points about communication skills and interpersonal skills. The other value that we're really trying to develop, I can't say we've hired for it, but it appears to me to be increasingly important as we look forward and we continue to grow is the ability to manage people, which is not something, it's incredibly important. You know, people don't leave jobs, they leave managers, or so the people at the GSB will tell you. But that it's a particularly acute challenge in a legal department, or at least in our legal department, and I assume we're representative in this respect, in that people don't go to law school because they want to manage people. They probably go to law school in part because they don't, right? Because you're interested in the law, you're interested in the intellectual pursuit, and you know, have maybe other objectives, but it's not something that draws people who are really focused on management. And then you end up in law firms, most people anyway, where there's no premium on management. And I promise you, whatever great firm you go to, there will be all of these stories, not apocryphal, about the star partner who's just a horrible manager, right? Now, there may be some people who are good, but it's almost paradigmatic in firms. It's like, oh, that guy's a train wreck, right? And but he's still extremely successful. You cannot be really, really successful in-house unless you know how to manage people. When I say manage, I mean not like get people doing the right things, but really truly take an interest in your report's career and mentor and, you know, be there, have the door open. It's a whole, you know, and obviously I'm struggling for words because I'm not very good at it yet either. I've only been doing it for a couple years. But it's a huge priority for us as an organization to keep our people motivated, to keep them excited, to keep them engaged, to keep them sort of heading in the right direction. And there's an absolute void in the academy for obvious reasons, and in the main training ground, which I think of as law firms.
It's an excellent point, and we talk about it on my team all the time. Inside law firms, you get ahead by being often the smartest person in the room, right? And in fact, you build teams of associates around you to make you better. So you become better by surrounding yourself with more people who make you better. Inside a company, leadership is completely different. Inside a company, the leaders get ahead by making everyone else around them better. And what you find out about CEOs, which distinguishes them from the best lawyers in the law firm, is that their number one skill is they make the people around them better. And that was a real reorientation for me when I got to HP, was understanding that that was really my goal. My goal had to be to make everyone around me better in the context of what we were doing. And so my team's first sort of directive was stop being the best player and become the best coach. I need to do that. You need to do that. We need to go on the management journey together. And it really is completely different than motivating some associates in a law firm, or who kind of have the I'm going to make partner, I'm not going to make partner motivation, and that's kind of all you need, right? And you only have to outrun all of the other horrible partners to get the best associates, right? Inside of a company, it's different. And you couldn't be more right about the fact that, learning to manage people is such a huge part of what it means to be in-house. And I'm sure, Mark, you've been doing it for a long time, so you're a little further down the curve than the rest of us.
You nailed it. I mean, it's completely true that I have 428 people who work for me, and there are probably 375 of them that if I had to do their job tomorrow morning, I would utterly fail. I'm very dependent on their expertise and ability to function in the organization, and caring for them, developing them, making them want to stick around is really job one. I remember when I was first managing people, they'd come to me with problems, and I'd think, why are they interrupting me? I have this work to do. And over time I learned, no, that is my job, is to motivate them and enable them to do what they do. And now I say, I have this whole team of people that do IP, and I said there's a good reason that people on my team have the word intellectual in their title and I don't, because they know what they're doing, and keeping them around is critical. I think to the point of hiring, though, I'm really interested in how it works out, because I've never, of the 428 who work for me and maybe the 550 lawyers I've hired in my career, I've hired only one right out of school. It's a very specialized case.
It's been phenomenal, and I'll give you an anecdote. As I said, it really changes, kind of the mentality, and I've got a lot of folks who've been sitting idle for a while and getting some newer folks who are hungry and aggressive. So there's one There's one person we hired out of school. He's now been here about a year. I think he's from Northwestern or Columbia. And he sits on the path out the door that I take every day and come in. And almost every day, he's there before I show up, and he's there when I leave. Now, there isn't any other established employee who I think keeps that schedule. And so, true story, about a month ago, I walked by, and it's 7 o'clock at night. Chris is still sitting there. I said, Chris, you make me feel bad. You're here when I get here. You're here when I leave. I'm going to move your cube so I don't feel bad. And he says, that's because I'm only half as smart as you are, so I have to work twice as hard. I said, dude, that is just too good. That's too brilliant.
He's been preparing that.
I said, that's just too brilliant. But I mean, the energy, the enthusiasm, and quite frankly, the uptake you get, and what it's really doing for us is it's pressuring that middle layer who has been around for a long time, is set in their ways, has their own view about how things should be done. And they're seeing this new, fresh energy come in. And it's more powerful than anything I could say to them about why they need to innovate, transform, and change the way they're looking at what they're doing. Because they're seeing it come up from the bottom, not come down from the top. And in big organizations, like I said, 1,200 people, it's more powerful when it comes up from the bottom than when it comes down from the top. So in addition to all the other benefits we're getting, it is absolutely changing the way people who have been there for a while think about their roles and see what's happening. It's been phenomenal, and that's why we're just ramping up. In fact, our goal is to have all entry into the company coming through law school hires or early career, and get away from hiring people who are 5th, 6th, 8th, 10th years. They're too expensive for what you're getting, and they haven't developed the skills that we need, and I think we can do it better. So anyway, a lot of fun. That's interesting, but I got to tell you, these kids they're an absolute kick. I'm enjoying it immensely. So.
Let me invite you to come down if you have any questions to one or the other microphone. If you want to address it to one participant in the future, please say that, or if you want it just to be an open question. We'll start on this end. Thank you.
So I'm going to put thank you for this speech. Actually, I'm from Brazil, so I have a really particular international question. Do you believe this growth of the in-house legal department is a U.S. trend, or is something that has been applied to all the branches in other countries? I mean, like Brazil and other countries. Do you think something that will be applied to all the countries to have this really strong department?
I think it maybe hasn't quite
Just
yet.
stole our in-house lawyer in Brazil from us. So.
And Mark stole
why
our
I'm glaring at
in-house
him.
make her head a Latin American. So there you go.
Thank you for training
Stole
that.
is probably the wrong word, but
I need a whistle.
Yeah.
I was hoping that wouldn't come up today, Colin.
last time I talked, you had taken somebody from me in Ireland. So I'm not doing any more panels with you.
All right, got it. So I don't know if it's a trend across, but it's certainly something that we are continuing to do, is invest in our in-house resources internationally as well. What we find is that the way people practice law in our company, maybe technology companies generally, is very different than necessarily how people practice law internationally. Like we've found, I'll give Japan as an example, because that's where we've hired our first counsel in-house. Very, very conservative advice. They did not want to be wrong, our outside law firm. And we were just in a very different frame, 3-4 years ago when we first entered that market and what we wanted to do. And we really couldn't get them comfortable with the ideas, with how aggressive we wanted to be. And I found that bringing lawyers in-house and getting them kind of to be part of the culture, understand the business, understand the risks we're willing to take and what we're trying to do, is a much better way to get the balanced judgment that we need as we're making some of these decisions. So we are going to continue to invest in that, and we've done it in Brazil, done it all around the world actually, and it's really made a difference to I'd say the quality of the advice we've gotten balanced with the risk that we want to take.
I agree. Half of our team, we have 600 people outside the U.S. We're in 54 countries. We have teams of not quite 30 in China, not quite 30 in India. We have about 10 in Brazil. So we continue to expand in-house. I think there's two aspects to it. One is taking more work in-house in countries from outside counsel. And then there's the second piece, which Mark alluded to, which I think is also going to become more prevalent, and that is doing more disaggregated work in other jurisdictions. A lot of the work that gets done on the legal side, especially on litigation, but in some other areas, doesn't necessarily have to be done by someone who's a US trained lawyer sitting in the US. And as you see lawyers become more effective in some of the other places, whether we're talking about India, whether we're talking about, Hungary or Poland, et cetera, the opportunity to disaggregate work, take a piece of a project, break it down into its component parts, and take the least sophisticated piece of that and move it into a low-cost jurisdiction is going to continue to grow. And you're seeing that some people call it LPO, and there's some companies like Quizlex and others who do it. But I think you're seeing a move towards even company legal departments thinking about how do I create this competency in a part of the world that has the language skills and has the educational capabilities to do it in a way that, like I said, is sort of disaggregated. So I think there's really kind of two things going on right now in that space.
Yeah.
I've got a question about the legal departments and the culture of companies in the Valley where there's a very strong engineering culture. They take on problems and they want to move on things quickly. And unfortunately, lawyers can often be seen as sort of, we've got this great idea, let's go ask the lawyers why we can't do it. So how do you guys, within your companies that are sort of trying to innovate quite quickly, try to develop that culture where the legal department's not a roadblock, but is a way to get to where the company wants to go? And in terms of our legal education, how might we try to think in ways that would be put us in a better position to serve a company in that way?
I'll take a crack at that because I think you framed it exactly right. We want to be a resource to help people, really a resource to help the company meet its mission. And at a lower level, if you abstract that down, we, at least on the product side, we want to be viewed, a product manager wants to get something launched. He or she needs some engineering resources, some design resources, some marketing resources, maybe some communication resources, and some legal resources to get the thing built and out the door. And so our job is to be there, to understand what we're trying to accomplish, to identify legal risk, and to propose strategies to mitigate that risk in a way that's consistent with the product. It's pretty easy to say, and if you're there early enough, it's not that hard. It really requires engagement early, and it requires very much a constructive mindset. If the answer, at least at our company, if the answer is no, you can't do that, you're just not going to get invited to the next meeting, and you can't do your job. So we very much need to be seen as a partner and as a resource that is going to help launch, not block launch.
So we agree 100%. We talk about a number of different things, but two things that I think are core is we're not risk mitigators. We're risk optimizers. We optimize for risk. We look at what the opportunity is, we understand the risks, and the goal is to get to the optimal outcome, as opposed to mitigation, which is kind of the idea around what's my least risky alternative. That's not the same thing as optimization. But more importantly, what we basically tasked everyone in the team about is you are a solutions architect. Your goal, like engineers, is to go in and find the solution, right? And no is never really a solution, That's not in reality a solution. And so there are clearly bright lines in every legal department. If it's illegal, you don't do it.
That comes
right?
up once in a blue moon.
But that's exactly right. That's not what we're really dealing with. And what you have to do is reframe the mindset, which is you're a solutions provider. And I will tell you, quite frankly, what we have found is our folks outside the U.S. are better at it than our folks inside because they're closer to the business, they're more engaged on a day-to-day basis, and they're more comfortable with the idea that they've got to find a solution. And we've been actually leveraging that to work with some of the kind of entrenched special interests on the U.S. side who've spent a long time kind of saying no or finding creative ways to say no in a way that it doesn't look like they're saying no.
He's talking about his finance department. It's what I've tried to do is actually create incentives for people to feel comfortable with coming up with solutions that work, that will give the customer what they need. It never works to say to a customer, well, that's not our policy. You might as well just use the middle finger on one hand or both hands at that point. They don't care about your policy. They're trying to find a way to use your products to make their world better. So I actually have something we call Barbarian Awards that are given out with a breaking glass sound happening in the background to teams of people who have gotten deals done, even though there was a lot of resistance internally from other parts of the company, because they were good for the customer, they were perfectly legal to undertake. And when we give those out, my CEO, John Chambers, comes to our meeting and he personally gives out the awards. So there's a lot of feedback that tells people in the legal department what you want to be doing is drive sensible, smart business solutions. In terms of legal education, I don't remember anything in my legal education that forced me to be conservative in the way I gave advice. I certainly had to analyze what worked and what didn't work, but I'm not sure I understand the question from the standpoint of impediments that are endemic to the education that force you to not be proactive in finding answers. Am I missing something, Professor Trianis?
Well, I think part of what I've heard students say is, the focus on case law, right? Is that because those are things that have gone bad, and therefore that sort of leads students to be more risk averse, perhaps starting off. And the other one just is the selection effect of coming to law school. Until recently, it was a relatively safe profession with relatively assured income. So
that's where you go to experiential learning on the other side there.
it could be. Actually, it was very interesting when all of you suggested what you're looking for in terms of people to hire, and I made a note of it, and they would be under what we would call, not necessarily pejoratively, but many would call soft skills, right? The leadership, management, communication, passion, all these things that it would be very useful for us to figure out how to deliver these things to students or how to help them. What about the harder skills? Are there any things, and sorry for my butting in here on the questions, are there harder skills? John, you mentioned you didn't have any exposure to business or finance before you took this position. Is that something the law school should do? Exposure to maybe foreign legal systems?
I think all of that is helpful. I think but I guess what I would say is having a basic understanding of a P&L and so forth is certainly helpful, but it wouldn't be something I would suggest that you spend a lot of time on, right? Because ultimately, what first and foremost most important is understanding the business of the company that you're in, and that's going to happen by sitting in that business, right? So having a little bit of business acumen, understanding a P&L and things like that, profit and loss statement and so forth, is important. I do think, though, that we have been as a profession too dismissive of the soft skills. The truth of the matter is what you find inside the companies is that most of the people who got to the top on soft skills. They're not the best technologist, right? They may not be the smartest person in any single room, but they're the ones who can play across all the rooms. They bring people together. They're glue. They can lead. And we've been a profession, understandably so, because in some ways it's the way the services were consumed for a long period of time, around the right and wrong answer, kind of the tell me what the law is. The number of times I get a call on tell me what the law is somewhere between 1 and 0, right? I mean, it never happens. And so that skill is important. You have to, but now it's almost assumed. My point is it's assumed. Everyone's coming with that skill. The question is, what are the soft skills that are really those that are most important to the business? Because those are the folks who get ahead, right?
Yeah, I'd say taking that a little further, judgment, building good judgment is so critical because, as you said, it's very rare that someone asks you where the law is, and if it is, that's the easy answer. But all of our companies work in this very gray space where there is no answer. And you have to kind of find your way through that gray. And the only way you could do that is someone who has just really good judgment. And that's not something you learn, I would say, but it's something over time that you build up. And hopefully, you know, you've read a lot, you've learned a lot. Like, so much of this, in my opinion, is just hearing and talking to people and understanding how they do things. And like, part of that is what went wrong in the case law, but part of that is how to do it right and how other people did it really well and understanding that.
Yes.
Thank you. Just building on what you said about soft skills, and I guess you've partially addressed it in talking about judgment and just discussions with people. I'm wondering, do any of your companies offer specific training around either communication or interpersonal dynamics or anything along those lines?
We've just actually gotten underway with that. I shouldn't say just gotten underway, but we are investing pretty heavily in that across the company, and we are in the legal department enthusiastic participants. And there's the two sort of categories of training that I've encouraged our folks to undertake are basically how to manage and how to be managed. It's not called how to be managed. I can't remember what it's called, but it's basically how to play your part in a management relationship if you're reporting upward, as well as obviously some of the skills we look for in how to manage, and really just focusing people to think about managing their team as sort of as part of their job. When you come in every day and you make your list of things to do, that's at the top. And we do have resources to enable people to take time and just think about that. We also have a leadership training program that is, I will say, generously in development, because I think it's really hard to bring to, how do you teach people to lead? That's, if somebody can crack the code on that, good luck. But it's still, I think, valuable to give people exposure to leaders across the company, exposure to different styles, let people sort of take the time and the space to find how they sort of show up, how they represent themselves in a way that's authentic to them and that can reach other people. That feels like really soft. I understand that, and it's just hard to get that right for companies with distinct cultures, and each of us has a distinct culture. So we're working on that, trying to get that right. But it's definitely something we're investing in as a company, and our department is playing a part in that.
So we obviously, the HR department has their own set of things, but we looked at that very carefully when I first got to HP, and quite frankly, it's not right for lawyers. And so we've had talent be our number one priority. Innovation is number two, talent is number one. We have our own talent program with our own sort of system, our own tools. We have a learning and development team, generously supported by HR, but really run through the legal department with our own development processes from the very bottom of the organization to the very top. Law firms don't really do mentoring. They try to, but they don't really. And the one thing they don't do a whole lot of is sponsorship, which is a whole nother different set of things, and the like. But there's also a whole experiential piece to it, which is getting people into different environments that ultimately causes them to develop the kind of skills. In particular, inside big companies, and I'm sure all the folks here have this issue, there's a whole set of soft skills, and then there's a whole set of cultural skills. Because you find yourself dealing with people around the world. And understanding what the cultural cues are that are being given is also important. So we are trying to get our folks much more international experience. And for the folks we hire directly out of law school, we're sending them for 2 weeks to a foreign site just to get them to understand that first work experience, which is what's it like to show up one day and you're in Shanghai and you're dealing with a group of people who have their entire business formed around Chinese culture, or go to Barcelona, or go to Sao Paulo in Brazil. completely different, right? So there's a soft skill aspect to it, and then there's this whole cultural overlay that we're forced to change. It's exciting, but it's really challenging. But we are there's nothing we focus on more right now inside the organization than talent, and that really means growing those skills more. We don't talk about legal advice. What we're really talking about is the soft skills that we've been talking about.
Yes.
I have a strange question. To be a general counsel, do you need any legal education? Is it not more important to be an MBA or a business process manager and hire people with a legal education? How do you see that? If I hear the stories today, it's more about soft skills, about managing, about processes.
My own perspective is I'm sort of assuming for everyone in our department, competence and then some in their legal acumen and their ability to actually do the job. I think these are additional functions that you need to succeed. Yeah, my job description at the end of the day is, to counsel the business and to protect the company. And you need to know the law to do it, or if you don't know it, you need to find out the answer. So.
But are you the counsel, or are other people in your department the counsel, and are you the manager?
It really just depends on the question.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, as a general counsel, you're still going to be the lawyer to the board. You're still going to be the lawyer to the CEO, et cetera. And I think in order to run the function, you do need to have those legal qualifications and chops. It's a good question in that as the law departments get bigger, you have a lot of non-legal responsibilities. Half of the folks in my team, 600 folks, are not lawyers. They're compliance people. They're in licensing and IP stuff that's different, right? Some of them are legal support. A lot of them are not purely non-legal. They're doing conflict minerals and social environmental responsibility around making sure that we're not that we're doing things that are environmentally friendly or viewed positively in the world. And most of those folks are not lawyers. What you need to do with, I think, as a general counsel, is surround yourself with people who have those other skill sets. So I have a chief operating officer for legal who is my finance and operations person who came out of the business and has 20 years of business experience. We have a small team of Lean Six Sigma process folks who are going around tackling all of the processes. We have our own little IT skunks team that goes out to figure out what technology we can deploy to make ourselves more efficient. So in that regard, it's a little bit more like being a CEO than a pure lawyer. But just like a CEO probably needs to have a really good business background, I still think the general counsel probably needs to have a really good legal background.
Yeah, ultimately, you're responsible for the legal positions that the company takes. And in some cases, you can rely on your team and everybody has a pretty similar view and it's compelling. But having the background to be able to interpret that quickly and effectively is important. There are other issues where I feel that the reason that the issue comes to me is because there's no good answer. And there are a variety of bad choices and someone needs to take responsibility for it. And to do that and to make a decision which way we're going to go. And to do that, having the substantive expertise is important. Just like leading a large engineering organization, it really helps to know something about how the products are put together, which you wouldn't know if you were previously doing something completely unrelated. So probably necessary but not sufficient is what I would say to the legal background of a general counsel.
And what part of your work
We just have time, 5 more minutes for 2 more questions. And sorry to interrupt, Deborah.
Well, it's less a question than a comment, since there's been so much focus on the soft skills, which we know for lawyers are often the hard skills. I can't resist noting that this was something that did not escape the notice of the Center on the Legal Profession, and one of its first projects was to put together a book of teaching materials for leadership in law schools, and Amanda Packle and I worked on that. So I'm proud to say that we've got a course on leadership and have been pioneers in developing course materials for other law schools. And I'm hoping that the wisdom that you just shared will be widely echoed. And here's a plug for that course, as well as for the broader issue of trying to teach some of these skills. Some are learned through experience, but you can learn a lot through case study, you know, all the standard ways that we teach. So thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
great.
Yes.
Hi, so I just wanted to give a quick plug. I'm an alum from the school, also a former practicing attorney, but now I'm currently the career coach over at Wilson Sonsini. So I wanted to, one, make a plug that, you know, law firms can do wonderful things, especially in the areas that you have indicated, but I also appreciate the great feedback from the in-house departments on what we can be doing better. Traditionally, the path has always been, especially at the time that I graduated, the path was law school taught you the analytical skills. You go out to the law firm and you learn sort of the general practice skills, and then you take that into a specialization and perhaps in-house. You know, John, I applaud the great innovative work that you're doing hiring folks straight out of law school. For the many of you who haven't yet kind of experimented in that realm, there are many associates who come to me, especially junior associates in this very robust market in Silicon Valley, considering how can I get in-house? And I'm kind of here for the short term because that's always been the traditional route. What kind of advice can I give them? You know, obviously working on the soft skills, working on general training, but should their training be general anymore? And in addition to that, sort of what would you consider to be the ideal time that you should kind of park at a law firm and try to squeeze the most out of that experience before looking to go in-house?
Good question.
You kind of know my answer.
Sure.
Let me just tell you why. And I know that's provocative, and that doesn't mean there isn't a path for others. But let me just tell you. Let me give you an example why I say that. So when I started a New York firm, you know, was an associate there for a couple of years before moving to a firm in Philadelphia and making partner. And at that point in time, the firm that I was with still had small cases. And I actually had small cases that I worked on myself with a little bit of junior partner oversight for most of my associate career. And I tried cases as an associate. From the time I became a partner until I left, the folks who worked for me, as far as I know, never tried a case. They didn't have the opportunity. We no longer had small cases. Those cases went to other firms or other places, but they didn't come to Morgan Lewis, and they didn't come to Drinker Biddle or Latham & Watkins. So as a result, the associates never tried cases. So what did they learn? They learned discovery. They learned attention to detail. They learned to work hard. They learned to write. But they didn't learn to litigate. So what are we doing? All of our single plaintiff employment cases, we are moving in-house. We've been doing more and more of them inside. And who's going to do those cases? You. First, second, third years. Because as Mark says, if I lose a single plaintiff employment case and it costs me $111,000 in Wisconsin, nobody really cares, okay? But what matters to me is you've just spent a year litigating a case, learning to litigate, and you will continue to move up the chain, and by the time you're a fifth year in my organization, you will be much more capable, much more experienced than a fifth year at a law firm. And by the way, you'll make less money than you do at the law firm. So it's a win for me, right? But it's also a win for you in terms of if what you want is a career and the best opportunities and best training you can get, I can give that to you. I can't give you more money than the law firm can give you. I'll never be able to do that. So if you want money, you should go there. But I can give you a really, really nice opportunity. And I can give you a really nice career. And if you make it to Deputy General Counsel, which are the people who report to me, you can make $800,000 to $1.25 million. That's a lot of money. It's not the $4 million that senior partners at the best law firms make. But most people in your position don't think that what they need is to go for the $4 million. They'd be very happy making $800,000 to $1.2 million and really loving the company they work for and really loving what they're doing. And that's what I'm betting on. And that's why I say there's something we can give that I think the law firms can't give because economically they've priced themselves out of a place where you can actually go and really learn what I need you to learn to come to HP and be good. Other than working hard and the attention to detail. And the challenge for me is to make sure I can give you that as well. So that's why I think I can do it, not everywhere, but in most areas where I need people, I think I can do it better.
And that's the part, John, where I've doubted my ability to provide that level of training, and why I second what Colin was saying about the discipline and training that comes in a large law firm, which may be overstated these days as the model has changed, and that's something to keep track of. I've always felt that if I hired people internally, that the type of training I would give would be very focused on how to be effective in that environment. As I said, I hired one person once, extraordinary academic background. He was a Summa at Princeton and Magna at Harvard Law School and won a lot of prizes. Second, he had been Judge Jackson's clerk on the Microsoft case. He was a 2-year district court clerkship because the judge wanted to keep him for the second year on the same case. So he knew more about antitrust law than anyone else in the United States as applied to technology companies. And third, he went to the same small high school that I did. But I said to him on the first day,
Go ahead and apply.
I said I could never train you properly so that if you wanted to be a partner in a law firm, you could go do that career. So you should really leave within 3 years if you want to do that. So he did. He left and he went to Latham. And he called me up a few months later. He said, I was working on this M&A transaction, and we had to put together a presentation for the client. I was working with a team of younger associates and some young partners, and when we went to the client, they asked me to do the presentation. They said, because you understand how these people think, and you understand how to communicate this with them. He said, so I really did learn something from you, even though it's good that I'm now in the law firm. So that's my concern, is can I provide that training? So I think you hit it right on the head with that comment.
Well, one of the soft skills that we need to make sure that we emphasize is the ability to end a meeting on time, right? So I'm going to do the best I can, and on all of our behalf, thank Mark and Vijaya and Colin and John.